Balu, sound check 1 2 1 2. Sound check, Balu. Please stand up, Balu. Testing 1 2. Sound check 1 2. Is it okay? Okay, sharp.
You know that we have to do that. Chair, we can proceed. We don't have a quorum, but we can proceed. We have 4 members.
No, just get me one pen. I don't own a pen. If you can please try to settle, we are about to start the meeting.
Could you be
Now, you are all welcome. Good morning. You are welcome to the Portfolio Committee meeting. We will explain the purpose of meeting today. Can we quickly, Andre, accept apologies?
Good morning, everyone. Chair, we have an apology from Mr. Beasley, from Mr. Cezani, and Mr. Mkutu will be joining us late. His flight is just delayed. He'll join us shortly. Thanks.
Thank you very much. And then can we get the a mover and seconder for the adoption? Member Mdluli?
Chair, I just want to say that I will be leaving at 12:30 because I have a meeting that was already arranged. So I'd like to be excused by 12:20 so I can be in time for my meeting. Thanks.
Chair, sorry, my apologies, Chair. We also have an apology from Mr. Chance, who's not here today.
Okay. Thank you. Member Mdluli moves the agenda. Member Siate, second. Thank you very much. And the agenda is duly adopted. Welcome to Deputy Minister Whitfield and Deputy Minister Godlimbi. I am informed that Deputy Minister Whitfield will be leading the delegation today. And welcome to the DG and all other officials that are here. The purpose of the briefing is for the DTIC to brief the committee on the implementation of the 8th master plan it's responsible for. This is to obtain high level of understanding of the objectives of an intervention introduced by the master plan and to determine the degree of the implementation as well as to determine the impact of this intervention and lesson learned. Furthermore, the DTIC to unpack its role in the master plan led by the departments where they play a significant role in the process of the master plans, as well as progress that has been made in relation to these master plans. This is why we are here today. We have allocated almost 3 hours for the debate. We will then immediately allow the Deputy Minister Andrew Wilfield to introduce the team and to take us through. Thank you very much. Over to you, Minister. You have give or take an hour for the actual presentation. We'll deliberate, then we'll use the last hour to answer and deal with other questions that would be outstanding. Over to you.
Good morning, Chairperson. Good morning to the members of the committee. Chair, I don't think that there are too many unfamiliar faces here, and given the hour that you've prescribed, I said it is a 43-page presentation. I think that we want to get into the meat of that presentation. Let me just welcome the acting DG and her team and representatives from the various branches and sectors. I do want to just say, Chair, that the development of the master plans, I think there are over 21 different master plans, but 8 that we are responsible for, which we will dive into in a moment. The critical point also to understand is that the presentation will be giving insights into some successes, but also challenges and opportunities that exist within the master plans. The other point to just remember is that the master plans, some of the master plans are being reviewed in order to evaluate and assess the impact, and I think that this presentation would be useful to come to the committee on a regular basis so that the committee is appraised of those developments in the review of some of the plans. TIPS has done an evaluation of some of the master plans as well, which is useful and may be of interest to the committee. But generally, Chair, the master plans and the presentation speak for themselves. The purpose of the master plans is to bring industry together with labour and the entire value chain as far as possible to coordinate to achieve our apex priority, which is rapid, inclusive and sustainable growth and job creation. And this is the apex priority of the Government of National Unity, and therefore all of the work that we do in the Government of National Unity is measured against that and others, but primarily insofar as the DTIC is concerned is whether we can achieve that inclusive growth and job creation as rapidly and sustainably as possible. And so in that context, Chair, I'm going to hand over to the acting DG to introduce the presentation and to take us through what I think will be a very insightful opportunity for the committee to understand where we are with the master plans and again, where the successes, opportunities and challenges lie and opportunities to strengthen certain elements. The last point that I just remembered, Chair, is what is critical to bear in mind and something that is being discussed in the department is strengthening the executive oversight committees. You'll find that there are challenges with a number of master plans that exist across government in order to make sure that we have the right frequency of meetings. Executive Oversight Committee meetings are obviously critical to come together and sort out some of the issues. And so the governance has been one of the lead issues across the department that the Minister has championed to make sure that we apply good governance and consistency in the application of governance across the whole of the department, and that obviously would include the executive oversight committees as well, which is a discussion that is ongoing within the department. Thank you very much. Over to the acting DG with your permission, Chair.
Thank you, Chairperson, and thank you, DM Whitfield, and good morning to DM Godlimbi. Good morning to the members. We are presenting the status report on master plans today. Our presentation is going to be led by Dr. Makube, who's sitting to my right. And we've got a number of colleagues that have joined, given that we've got 8 master plans. So we've got our Chief Director responsible for agro-processing, who will also be responsible for the sugar, poultry, furniture, and cannabis master plan. Ms. Mumisa, we've got our Director responsible for the automotive master plan, Mr. Matome. We've got a Director responsible for the steel and metal fabrication master plan, Ms. Nyakalo, and Director responsible for the clothing, textile, leather, and footwear master plan, Dr. J. Watt. And we've got the colleagues from our incentive branch who are also important parts of the master plan process, and they have a responsibility particularly on the global business services master plan. Ms. Susan Mangole, the acting DDG, and Dimakats Ohomo, who is the Director responsible for global business services. As the Deputy Minister has said, and I won't take too much time, the master plans are a government-wide program. There are a number of departments that are pursuing these master plans as a platform for business and government to co-create plans that assist sectors to grow, take advantage of opportunities, and also overcome challenges quicker than each of us would be able to do so individually. As the DM Whitfield has indicated, it is also a platform for labor, for business and government to work together towards the outcomes that have been outlined as key outcomes of the GNU, but of course building from the 6th administration. So what we're going to be presenting today is the status quo of these master plans, and then linked to that, some of the areas going forward that we would be looking at. It is important to say up front that these master plans are almost like micro sectoral plans that will form an important part of our industrial policy as that is being finalized and would be presented to the committee in due course. And the work of reviewing the master plans is not about stopping implementation, it's actually about amending as we are going, and where we need to change direction, that we do so as we move forward, because of the scale of the challenges that we face, and the requirement that we move with speed to change direction. So the expectation shouldn't be that a master plan will be suspended for monitoring and evaluation. The purpose of an EOC is actually to do an evaluation of what is being proposed and what is being implemented, and the areas where we need to quickly amend or change course if that is required. So you will see in the presentation that we would also share with you how frequently ministers meet with captains of industry and the leaders of organized labor. And we will also share with you some of the highlights of what we've been able to achieve and be very frank about the areas where we know we're going to need to strengthen going forward. So with that, Chairperson, through DM, I would like to ask my colleague, Dr. Makobe, to take us through the details of each of the master plans. Thank you.
Thank you, DG. Good morning, Deputy Ministers, Chairperson, and other honorable members. I will do as such, take you through the presentation. Okay, so this is the outline of the presentation. It will provide an overview of the master plans, some economic analysis, governance structures to implement the master plans, progress to date, the impact, roles of other departments, and cost-cutting challenges, including opportunities. Then I'll conclude. So in the system, or what we have now, it's about 8 master plans in the clothing, textile, footwear and leather, sugar, furniture, poultry, automotive, steel. Recently we have added medical devices and global business services. So the intention basically is to support labor-intensive sectors, given some of the economic and employment challenges we have in the country. So there is a methodology that we have when we conceive and implement the master plans. So we have about 5 phases, starting from preparation, moving to lastly monitoring and managing the master plans. I think it's important that as we implement those master plans, we also, monitor the implementation, and that's the reason why we are here, to report back on the implementation of the master plans. There are pillars, that are cutting across all the master plans. What we are trying to achieve is to optimize the local market. We also want to take advantage of the changing regional markets and growing markets in Africa. So that is also our focus. Deepening localization, it's key in the master plan, basically to increase local output. Infrastructure investments, it's another area. Transformation, obviously, economic transformation is key in this country, as well as technological development, and linked to that, it's skills development. So we, in the configuration of the master plans, the Deputy Minister spoke about the role of the Executive Oversight Committee, which was chaired by the Minister, and also Deputy Ministers do play a role. And that is a very important committee in terms of governance, so that when there are some policy issues that require immediate interventions, then the EOC can play a role in resolving those challenges. And this slide just provides what has happened in different sectors, the role of EOCs. There have been meetings over the years, but the slides just indicate that most of the sectors had their last EOCs around May, just before the elections, and I know very well that the other EOC meetings are being planned, and then they are being scheduled, and I know that the autos will be sitting very, very soon. But just an indication that the meetings have been held and certain decisions have been taken. In terms of, this is an overview in terms of jobs that have been supported. As you can see overall there, it's slightly more than 696,000 jobs have been supported. And then, you know, we also provide data in terms of the different master plans. And I must say that, you know, this is it's not a static target. The numbers do change, but we rely on the quarterly labor force survey as issued by the Stats SA, the Q2 report. We know that some of the structural challenges we have in the Stats SA is the firm level data, and there is an indication by Stats SA that, you know, there will be a movement towards quarterly employment survey, because the limitation with the quarterly labor force survey is that it surveys households. It does not go to the firm level, and some of the figures then will have to get them from industry associations, as reflected there, that some of the numbers come from the Sugar Association and poultry. The other area that we look at is the role of manufacturing and its contribution to GDP. And as you can see there, that in the first quarter, the manufacturing, you know, GDP also broadly decreased, and also manufacturing decreased by 1.5%. But if you look at the previous quarter, manufacturing has been positive. But historically, you know, the number is below what we would like to have as a country, and that's the reason why we have the master plan, so that we intervene in critical sectors of the economy, so that we scale up the role of manufacturing in GDP. What we also look at is the index of volume of manufacturing production. And as you can see over the years, that we, in terms of the output, we have not really reached the numbers that we had before COVID. But in the last few months, you'll see that, you know, the output it's increasing, but from, you know, different levels as compared to the previous sectors. And the leading sectors there are food, beverages, petroleum, chemical, rubber, and plastic sales. Now, employment, that's also a challenge, but this slide mirrors what the other figures that we presented earlier. And the emphasis here is that, you know, the master plans do play a critical role in the support that we give, because in the absence of the interventions that we make, the situation might be dire. But we note the fact that, you know, it's still challenging, but the master plans do play a role in stabilizing the situation, which, you know, it through the quarterly labor force survey indicates that the numbers are also declining, but there are green offshoots in certain sectors, particularly the food and beverages. Now, the other measure that we look at is the investments in infrastructure, equipment, and technology. And as you can see here, that, you know, the government, historically, there's been also a decline in gross fixed capital formation, but, you know, through the investments, private investments in renewable energy technologies, as well as government investments in ports and rail, the situation is changing. But from a master plan point of view, the reason why we are bringing in the role of capital investments is that, you know, when you look at the total factor productivity in terms of the intensity of the resources that we are using and the efficiency, it's also important that we scale up investments in plant machinery and equipment for efficiencies, and not that we want to displace one economic factor with another, but just to increase total factor productivity moving forward. And then I will zoom quickly into the autos. This slide just indicates the pillars, which I've said there are 7 pillars. The main issue here is that in terms of localization, I mean, the ambition in the country is that we want to scale it up to 60%. And what has happened is that in terms of, well, the data indicates that in terms of global production, we are 0.6%, and in Africa, we are 54.1%. And as I've said, regional trade does provide opportunities for us. We also provide data there in terms of exports in the category of vehicles which are being produced and assembled in the country. And what is key in this sector is that as government, we have tabled the white paper on electric vehicles. We also have the automatic industry transformation fund, which is key in the development of manufacturers in the value chain. So that is key in terms of what has happened in the sector. But the challenges obviously is the imports of motor vehicles, you know, from mostly Indian and Chinese OEMs, which are, you know, because of the pricing, they are also, you know, we are seeing that they are taking the market share in the countries, not only in this country, but we have seen in other jurisdictions that this is the challenge. But, you know, it's something that government is also looking at with the industry to see as to how do we then level the playing field. I'm moving into steel. The main issue in the steel industry is low demand across, you know, so the main issue is that there is a surplus of steel globally, and that also affects our efficiency in the country. Tied to that is that there is the demand for steel as a result of slow implementation of infrastructure projects. That affects the production in the steel industry, and it's not only local demand, but we have seen that, you know, imports as well, they are increasing in the country. And then we are working with our sister entity, ITEC, in terms of coming up with protection measures where it is necessary. And what is also, this slide presents the spatial outlook of where steel production is happening in the country. And as you know, that you know, the Newcastle plant is also under serious production difficulties. And again, in the Western Cape, we know that the Saldanha steel plant has been also stopped operation, mainly because of the challenges and the economic challenges that I've presented. But working with the industry and other departments, discussions are ongoing to resolve some of the the challenges. So this slide is again an indication that, you know, since COVID, we also had some challenges, but the oversight committee has been there to deal with some of the challenges. There is a project management office at TIPS, which tomorrow they will also provide a better explanation on what TIPS is doing, but it's, again, as a sister entity, it's assisting in the implementation of certain master plans. The other key issue that has emerged there is the local content compliance office to look at mainly the tenders that are being issued by entities to make sure that there is compliance on the local content. And lastly, there is a management committee chaired by the Deputy Minister in a case where the EOC cannot sit. So these are the instruments that are being implemented in the steel industry. We are looking at the preferential price system and the export tax on scrap metals. We're looking at the illicit trade, industrial financing support to scale up production and come up with some efficiency gains in certain industries, as well as localization. So the challenges moving forward, as you know, the geopolitical tensions and again, the new steel mill plant in Zimbabwe, we see that as a threat, but also from a collaboration point of view, it might be an opportunity. Internationally, especially in Europe and the US, the carbon border adjustment mechanism it's a challenge for us. So we need to, if we are to still capture that market, respond to that in terms of decarbonization. So that is a main issue in the steel industry, is that, you know, how do you scale up production, how do you come up with efficiencies, but also how do you decarbonize. In the clothing, textile, footwear, and leather master plan, the focus here is on you know, capturing the retail sector. And what we have seen is that through because of COVID and the disruptions in the global supply chain, we have seen some uptake in terms of locally manufactured products in the retail sector, and that has been good for us in terms of localization. Some of the units that are now being taken up by the local retail sector. The input costs, we are also addressing them. The other issue that we are dealing with is combating custom fraud in the sector, especially high value clothing materials. We have seen that there is an uptake in terms of what we call fake products. So working with SARS, they are the custom fraud activities which we jointly undertake with them, and the slide provides the numbers of what we have been able to capture there in terms of minimizing the fraud that is taking place in the retail sector. So, yeah, what I can say is that 3 areas is to deepen efficiencies in the sector, growing the local procurement in the retail sector, and also dealing with custom fraud. So the sugar value chain, the main issue here is the market growth and also the diversification of the market players, particularly the inclusion of black-owned sugar mill owners in the sector. So we are working through the EOC to deal with some of the pricing challenges that we see In the sector, there are updates on the investments. Companies are investing at the back of the sugar industry master plans. We are also dealing with the regulatory challenges. We have made some amendments in the regulations, working with the South African Sugar Association. And we have seen that through some interventions, the imports have declined, and also localization has increased as a result of the master plan interventions. So key in this slide is the role of the transformation fund in placing diversified and emerging manufacturers and producers in the steel industry, particularly the small scale grower support fund. I'm moving to the furniture industry. So the issue here is the sales are very low when you look at the manufacturing data. And the challenge here is to address the raw material shortages. So one can also argue that, if you look at the furniture industry, it's also linked to, the construction of social houses, because when government also construct those houses, there is an uptake in terms of furniture demand. So it's also linked to employment and the salaries. So it is important that we look at the industry and analyze it in that manner. But the other thing that we do is to drive investments, and we can see that BG Bison, Bravo, and Restonic have made investments, and in a variety of areas in the country, Mkondo, Garsbande, Cape Town, and Durban. And again, there is a future challenge fund here to support diversified and emerging suppliers and manufacturers, including the skills development. In terms of localization, we are working again with SARS, the custom officials, to make sure that there is no under-declaration of furniture coming into the country, but also supporting localization through government procurement. Poultry, it's another area that we are working with and the issue here in the poultry industry has been, the avian influenza, which has affected the production, as well as had an impact on the pricing. So the master plan has played a role in terms of minimizing the impact, and also we do report in here that the EOC held the meeting in May, and where the minister recommended that we must move now into the phase 2 of the master plan in terms of development. And we also had to deal with trade measures as a result of the dumping of chicken from and poultry products from Brazil, Denmark, Ireland, Poland, and Spain. We had to import anti-dumping measures as a trade instrument where we can see that there is unfair competition from our international traders. So the impact, we also supporting the contract growers, that's the role of the master plan. There's been some investments in the industry, and also the impact of the avian flu has lessened a little bit. So we are seeing an increase in terms of production as well. But key to that is the role of emerging contractors. Now, the medical technology master plan is the new one that has been relatively added this year. again, is to manufacture medical devices because we are importing a lot of medical devices. And given that we are a country with a high burden of disease, it means that we have to rely on the medical devices. So there is an opportunity for increased localization. So working with the Department of Health, we have signed off on this master plan, and we are hoping then to supply the industry. Lastly, it's on the global business master plan, and my colleague will explain later on it, but here the main issue is to take advantage of the labor intensity of the global business master plan and the opportunities to drive BE supplier development and promoting decent work. This is it's an area which provides an opportunity for South Africa to bring in offshore work. Also on the supply side, there is an opportunity to scale up offshore services from South Africa, given that services also play a very important part in the economy. And in doing so, there is a need for us to drive transformation and sustainability of the work. So the sector, has contributed close to 38 billion rands over the period from 2018 to March 2024. And, the master plan then it aims at accelerating this area of work, which is critical for us. And we are also going to expand the sectors in which we are going to offer the services as the country. And this slides provides areas where there are opportunities for South Africa to capture the market, including areas where English is not necessarily the first language. So we can play a role, as a country to offer services in those areas, including the opportunities in terms of the export revenues. So the other master plan which we have taken over now as the department is the cannabis master plan. As you know, there is an opportunity there to deepen the output, but also provide opportunities for emerging growers. So the DTIC is now coordinating the master plan. Initially, it was not us, but we will deal with it. But I must emphasize that there are legal, regulatory, and licensing issues that must be taken into consideration and resolved in order to scale up commercialization in the sector. The cross-cutting challenges, as we know that, from the input side, there are issues of logistics, energy. They affect the competitiveness of some of the master plans, and we are pleased that through the coordination of the presidency, the national crisis committees in energy and logistics, there's been some improvements, but those are key in driving competition in the master plans. Also the issue of localization. We are of the view that the implementation of the Public Procurement Act is key in unlocking opportunities in some of the sectors where the state is also the buyer of materials. And obvious ongoing work, working with SARS and other government agencies, is to deal with custom fraud. While the highlights in terms of notable gains, those are listed in the sector. I've already spoken on some of them, but key for us in the autos is taking advantage of the changing global changes in the autos industry and the new electrical vehicle master plan or white paper is critical in positioning South Africa as one of the producers in the sector, and we are going to drive transformation. We are working with the OEMs in this area, and we have noted the investments in furniture, poultry. The main issue was to deal with tariffs, but also the avian flu, which has reduced to a particular extent, and then it provides us with the opportunity to increase production. And again, the sugar ones, we note the declining imports and transformation that has been deepened in the area. So in terms of steel, again, we note the competition that has been brought by the mini mills, the investments that are taking place in high quality steel products, investments in primary flat steel market, and increasing competition in the non-ferrous steel sector. So I think this is more or less the light slide is on the lesson learned. It's the role of the EOCs in decision making and clearing out challenges, speedy sectoral interventions through the master plans, and again, given the revolving nature of the economy, if you look at 15 years ago, the EVs were not an issue. Now they are an issue, and other areas of decarbonization, and through the master plans we are able to intervene speedily. And I mean, in South Africa we know very well that you know, the key issue is the social contract, and we are of the view that the master plans are an innovative way to implement the social contract, working with business, labor, and community in implementing the industrial policy in South Africa through the master plans. Yeah, so the case studies, I won't go through them. They're for you to read. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. That's the presentation within, I think, 40 minutes. So we did well.
No, thank you very much. Welcome, members. Welcome, Member Tambo, to the committee. We will now allow members of the committee to engage, and I think we've got sufficient time to engage with this presentation. Member Kigaba, Member 3, Member Mdluli, Member Tambo.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you, Honorable Deputy Ministers and the delegation, both from the department and related industries, for the presentation. One of the questions I would like to know is what are the challenges? You do outline some of the challenges that are faced by these sectors in terms of global markets, but just looking at not only global markets and global value chains, including domestic, what are other challenges? Because I think you were, what's the word? you were a bit brief in that regard. Maybe if you could just go a little bit more elaborate, and skills, transformation, access to infrastructure, and even prices. Now, you know, for a country that produces the minerals that are used in the production of steel, and we still do have some steel industry in the country. What are the challenges that are faced in this regard? My understanding is that we import a bulk of our steel, particularly for infrastructure and other services, and are affected by international prices that are set for these products. So, but I would just like to get a picture of the challenges we face in this regard. With regard to transformation, given that we provide so much support for these sectors, surely we should have leverage to demand greater transformation from them. What is the information available to you in regard to the role of these sectors in supporting transformation? The various documents produced by government for the 10-year review in 2004 and in 2014, the 20-year review, and I suppose it would be the same for this year, the 30-year review, indicates that there's been greater transformation in all aspects: gender participation, skill, management, and so on, in areas where government has direct involvement. But in the private sector, there hasn't. It's been lagging behind. So, given that we have leverage in terms, because of the support we provide these sectors, what has been progress in terms of transformation? Are we monitoring it? Are we making an input? Are we demanding greater transformation in these sectors? The second question, Chair, is with regard to the issue of greater coordination, which you raise in slide 20. What is the involvement of other departments? You do say in one of the bullets that you are resolving issues of logistics and rail, energy and rail. But, you know, that's more like there has been problems. But it doesn't sound proactive to say, if government says to Eskom and Transnet, we are investing resources to grow these sectors. Therefore, we want you to participate in the master plans, in the governing structures of these master plans, so that issues of sufficient energy supply, sufficient rail provision are addressed in a proactive manner going forward, rather than when there are already constraints. Are there such, is there such involvement of these other relevant departments? I'm thinking of this because I remember around 2012 2012 or so, DPE established stakeholder forums, which involved DTI then and these automotive stakeholder forum, the mining stakeholder forum, to try and unlock the constraints they were experiencing in regard to these services. Among others, Transnet constructed an automotive wagon to move the transportation of vehicles headed for Durban in particular, and from the ports, to move them by rail. Is there still such engagement that seeks to address these issues, provide solutions, and ensure that we assist these sectors to grow their competitiveness? Because even the investments that would have been done at the Durban Port Terminal were in part influenced by the complaints by these sectors that there are constraints experienced. So without over-elaborating the point. The third question, Chair, is with regard to what's the plan going forward? I mean, there are these master plans, sugar, automotive, steel, so on. But in relation to the direction that our economy is taking going forward, issues of the fourth industrial revolution, of the electric vehicles, are the new master plans that are going to be established? And how do we ensure, how do we ensure that these master plans are established in such a way that they don't just become passive respondents to the structure of the South African economy as at the present moment, but they are used to drive structural transformation in the economy? Because the South African economy is currently heavily dependent on mineral energy complex related industries. And that's why you would say in the presentation that manufacturing, mining have experienced a decline. Now, what's the view? Because we want manufacturing to become actually the major driver of growth and development in the country. We want the South African economy to be industrialized. So what's the plan with regard to how we use these master plans strategically to shift direction, the direction of the South African economy? And finally, Chair, in terms of the inputs and components that drive infrastructure investments, are there plans? I mean, at a certain stage, we decided to dispose of ISCO when we started reinvesting in infrastructure rollout, importing steel at import parity prices. Now, we do make the manganese and the iron ore and other, we mine these resources that are used to develop steel and other services. Now, what's the thinking in that regard? Are there discussions with this? We think we can begin to expand steel production in South Africa and to support the greater development, because it's not only with regard to steel as an input, but you also, if you expand your rail infrastructure, certainly Transnet is going to require the rigs, the wheels, and so on, are not developed in South Africa. So what's the thinking in that regard? But Chair, with your indulgence, just one final question. Again, on the issue of greater coordination. One of the problems with the visa regulations, we saw it with recently, where one department formulates a policy, embarks on a whole consultation process, and gets that policy adopted by by Parliament. And then the other department says afterwards that but that policy has a negative impact on our sectors, sugar industry being an example. So how government coordination? Because from experience, the weakness of the cabinet committee and cabinet cluster system is that departments come their policy agenda, are in a hurry to have a decision taken, but the consultation doesn't become sufficient with other departments. But it's adopted, it's already in the pipeline. Now they must chase after the policy to stop it after it has been passed. What processes are there to ensure that this greater government coordination you are referring to ensures that there is sufficient engagement to ensure we don't allow leakages of policies that at a later stage will have an impact not only on other sectors but on the greater economy?
Thank you very much, Member Thring.
Thank you, Chair. Welcome the fact that South Africa has these master plans in place. It is my view, Chair, that we should never apologize for the master plans that we have developed and continue to build on in order to protect our economy and to look at increasing the amount of employment that South Africa desperately needs. Have huge subsidies that are given towards their particular sectors, and they do not apologize, and in fact sometimes even threaten South Africa with tariff increases and different measures, economic measures, in order to protect their industries. So I think on the whole, I think we should never offer any apology for the tariffs that, for the master plans that we have. There are some concerns though, Chair, I think but maybe on the economic profile of the manufacturing sector and the employment in manufacturing in thousands. It's sometimes difficult to, when you look at that particular graph, you've got, how do you read that? So I think if we could sometimes just make it very clear what we're actually speaking to. I'm talking about that graph, the employment in manufacturing in thousands. It says in thousands, but yeah, I think we just need to be with regards to how some of those graphs, the numbering is actually put out there, just makes it easier to read. Chair, I think that when we had the South Africa EU parliamentary exchange, I made mention of the hypocritical stance of the European Union, and in particular European countries, and in particular with regards to CBAM, where it was very clear that CBAM essentially was targeting our imports to the European Union. Huge tariffs that they were, and then your I think it was black spot on the oranges and our citrus, and other ubiquitous tariffs that the EU was looking at imposing. However, no tariffs on the critical minerals that the EU needed. No tariffs. Despite the fact that some of those critical minerals that they needed, there was huge carbon investment going into the production and the export of those particular minerals. Despite also the fact that our coal exports to Europe at the time increased by some 700%. And they were placing pressure on South Africa to close our coal-fired power stations. So there's this hypocrisy, particularly coming from, and we must be able to confront that hypocrisy head on in order to protect our industrial base. But Chair, perhaps one of the questions that I have is, I raised in one of my speeches how Africa in particular is treated when it comes to concessional financing. Your first world countries pay next to zero interest on loans. Some actually zero interest on loans, concessional finance loans. Yet African countries in particular pay in excess of 5%, sometimes even up to 10% when it comes to concessional finance loans. And so I think that, again, there's this treating of Africa as the Cinderella of the world. Our local industry, what, if any, talks are there with regards to your developmental financial institutions to level the playing field, so to speak, when it comes to instruments such as concessional finance? Chair, it is concerning that we have some of our steel mills that are in decline, and the fact that the Saldanha mill has actually closed. I have family up in the Saldanha area, and so over the years when we would pass there to see the activity was a sense of pride. But the fact that there is now no activity taking place because of the so-called decline, the increase in the great supply that there is in steel, and the local decline in the need for, or the demand for steel, I think is concerning. And that also speaks to perhaps the state of our South African economy. But what are the mitigating interventions? And I didn't necessarily hear what is actually being done to address the challenge that we have within the steel sector. I think it is a concern, the fact that we actually have a decline in GDP growth in the first quarter, as well as a decline in our gross fixed capital formation, where in the first quarter, despite the fact that we've had no load shedding, one would have expected for there to have been an uptake. And we are being carried to a large extent by our agricultural sector. I think it's concerning, where we have a particular focus also as a DTIC on growing our industrial base. And so it is a concern. And Chair, while we have some 696,000 jobs that have been supported, I think what we want to see is, 696,000 jobs created. And while we welcome jobs that are being supported, because we certainly don't want to lose more jobs, about in this particular committee. And then maybe finally, Chair, I think just maybe 2 points. The one takeaway would be with regards to, I look at some in the Middle East and what the Middle East is doing with regards to these are desert countries. South Africa is said to be a water scarce country, but your Middle East countries where industrial growth is, there's booming industrial growth. Your UAE, one of the things that they're doing is desalination, the creation of desalination plants along their coasts. And I think that water in particular for industrial growth is going to be key. And when we look at our when we look at some of the areas, industrial areas, the requisite amount of water. But going forward, what, if any, are there any thoughts going into improving and ensuring that from an industrial scale, we are not going to have the challenge with water as we had with electricity? And then finally, Chair, our electric vehicles and the challenges that we're experiencing within the motor industry. We seem to be at times to treat imports, particularly from China, with kids' gloves. Because China is also one of our, is a growing export market for South Africa. But I think that the motor industry in South Africa, I don't think that it is a risk that we should treat with kids' gloves. And I think that there has to be some robust discussion with regards to how we protect our motor industry, particularly with the growth of Chinese vehicles. I know that within the EU and in the Americas, in particular North America, tariff needs to be some interventions also to protect our motor industry. And then, Chair, I think the one concern, I think we dealt with this also in the previous administration, was the undervaluation of goods coming into the country, and I'm not sure which particular country. In the last dispensation, I think that it was predominantly from China, where we had goods being undervalued and incorrect invoices and so on, incorrect invoicing in terms of goods coming into the country. I think that there has to be this continued discussion with SARS to ensure that we nip this in the bud. Thank you, Chair.
Madam Mdluli.
Thanks, Chair. I just have a few questions here. I'll start off with the question on page 7. It says here, jobs supported by master. No, we need more clarity on that. What do you mean by jobs supported by master plans? Are those jobs that have been organically created, or is it some partnership with these companies, or no, we just need more clarity on that? And the second one is with regards to the issue of port inefficiencies as well as the water crisis that's been going on for a while. Is the DTIC, as well as the Department of Water and Sanitation, to find ways on how you address these issues, because these issues end up affecting the DTIC, in the work that they do. So, do you have any engagements with these departments? If so, how do they take form, and what has come up, to solve the issues that are affecting ports, as well as the issues that relate to water and sanitation? And also page. Okay, page 27, slide 27 speaks about a transformation fund. I'd like to ask the progress on this fund, because you say that a total of 233 million, well, over 200. What is the progress of this? Because I mean, we want to see a return on investment. So what's the ROI on that? You know, because I mean, it's nice to have the figure, but what's the return on investment? And off to page 29. Okay, 29, it speaks about skills development on the progress of furniture master plan. So it says here that the city of Cape Town committed 1 million rand in 2021, and there's also other, commitments that have been made. So what's the progress on that? Because it's one thing to commit, but what are the results thus far? And page 19. Page 19, under industrial financing support, it says here that total investments by the IDC into steel value chain includes approvals of 20 billion, with total investments facilitated of 45 billion, which has led to a creation of 10,632 new jobs and saved 7,812. Which are these companies that have led to these jobs? Like, we want the actual breakdown. I mean, it's one thing to say these figures, but what is the actual breakdown that we believe these figures, And yeah, thanks. Just regards to that. And just one last one is the progress of it's the EOC. Who holds the EOC accountable? Because I mean, it's one thing to have the executive oversight committee, but then it's another thing to ensure that they do their job and they set their targets and their targets are actually met. So how does the oversight of that committee work, to ensure that the job is done? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Member Tambo.
Thank you very much, Chair, and greetings to the department. Thank you for your very warm welcome. So I want to touch on a couple of issues because I think the report makes a lot of, a couple of inadvertent concessions on the progress of economic growth and industrialization in South Africa. And I'm not sure if they're aware that they make these concessions or if they're in the correct position to make them. Because a lot of the reflections on the steel industry suggest that there is a general challenge of sluggish economic growth and just a general lack of industrialization in South Africa. Because the reasoning of the decline of the steel industry for me is insufficient, considering, because it states in the graph that was presented to us here that the decline in the steel industry has generally begun since around 2005, 2006. And since then, there's been no real meaningful recovery. And it cites low levels of demand locally and sluggish economic growth, and of course just a surplus within the sector globally. But if this has been happening since 2005, because I don't take 2020 as a rightful excuse, because the decline is cited, and it's one of the inadvertent concessions that I think is made by the representation of a dwindling steel industry, which looks like it's dwindling into extinction if we look at all the mills that have been closing since 2005. So I really want to know, is there any other deeper sort of understanding as to why there's been a prolonged decline? Because I do find it hard to believe, with all the levels of modernization globally in South Africa, that low levels of demand of steel, I mean the turnaround or proclaimed turnaround strategies around railway infrastructure, what really is the reason? Because it can't be demand. So it can be perhaps a factor. I'm really curious as to what else the cause finding demand for steel, especially because I think it's also part of these inert concessions that South Africa is not industrializing. Perhaps the department didn't mean to that concession, but it looks like you are. Because if there's a low level of demand for steel, it means there's no purpose in South Africa, and why is that? So I think it points to a much larger general problem. And the second thing to ask is if there's any data, how many jobs have been lost in this industry since this decline that I know between around 2005, 2006. I think it would be important that since the closure of the plants in South Newcastle, Van der Beek, We've gotten a couple of minutes of job losses, but perhaps past decade, is there any indication that jobs have been lost? In that, I think again, thirdly, on all levels of low demand, I'm curious as to who would really be the local consumers of steel, like at a large scale. Would it be the private sector? Would it be the public sector? And if you're able to make that decision rather, like say there's low levels of locally, who would it be attributing to of steel Africa? Because you said infrastructure spend as part of the challenges you confront. Who's to like make that extra spend? Because I think it lends details to whether South Africa's actual industrial path as it has claimed to be on in the past 10 to 15 years. Because if there's low levels of local demand, cited levels of infrastructure spend, it means the public sector is not spending on steel in a sufficient manner. So ordinarily, who would be the largest contributor to the purchasing of steel? And then fourthly, in your cross-cutting, to note that there's port challenges affecting import of raw materials, which affects local producers. Perhaps if you delve deeper into what are those port challenges, like what are the challenges ports specifically, and which countries are impacted, the challenges in the ports. So challenges at the ports, like not at a face value overview, what are the specific challenges and which countries are affected by the persistences at these ports and sectors. Lastly, you note that there are some government entities that no longer enforce local content, like the usage of local capacity to fulfill government. And as a result, that employees are being laid off. Important for all of us in South Africa to know which government entities are in particular no longer enforcing local content, using local capacity to fulfill their orders. Which has have these employees been laid? Because if an increase in unemployment being created by entities not subscribing to local usage, then those need accountable. And I think I'll end it there. Thank you.
Ma'am, good welcome. I know they're still warming up and you've read this important work. So, DM Wilfred, so you say that the master plans about deepening localization, about infrastructure build program, and about transformation agenda in the main. And you're saying that the pursuit here is the intensive labor initiative, if I got you correctly. Now, the example of a steel sector in 1929 is created as the SOE. Because government at the time was determined to push industrialization in South Africa and build infrastructure and so on. But in 1989, the apartheid government privatized ISCO, and subsequently it got sold to the Mittal family in 2002. And in 2024, they are not sure whether they want to be in or they want to be out. Highfeld Steel gets sold to Russians in 2006, and Member Thring is complaining about the closure of Saldanha and so on and so on. Now, so all these things, as they're happening, the trajectory of the 7th administration will have, succinctly over time, DG and DM, and the two DMs will know that there has been an agreement that we must pursue full-scale industrialization in South Africa. So, within this sector alone, I think Member Tambo, as well as Member Thring, are also asking critical question with regard to what is our understanding and appreciation, so that we can then know where we're going. The auto sector, and I'll come to just what point I'm trying to make with this thing. In the auto sector, we've made an assessment, and I know that you've not received the feedback or the document. We've asked you, of the 10 billion that the DTIC gets, 5.1 goes to incentive, and majority of those, they go to auto sector. And obviously, you know, I don't have the facts because they have not been supplied to us. But what we know is that a bigger chunk probably goes to auto sector. And we know that many years, and we've not been able to produce our own vehicle. And there's never been any attempt, because of a number of things, not because we have no capabilities from R&D. The main problem for us not to even attempt, we're told that, and then you need a significant capital investment, and raw materials are scarce, and the list is long of why we're unable to contribution. And just today, in the portfolio, we're made aware that Toyota says that there's quite a number of disruptions that are taking place. The logical question, therefore, and I'm just using these two sectors, and probably almost in all the other subsectors we can, because we've got sufficient time to deal with them. But these are downplaying other sectors in the main. We have been supporting established multinational auto companies. And not that there's anything wrong with it. In the context scope for the market, because we can no longer claim that the market is not sufficient for new entrants. In fact, we are now being over-flooded by the auto sector from China. You know, they're producing and got a price. You know, we saw it here in Cape Town recently. Quite a number of new, So we can no longer argue that there is no sufficient market when there have been new entrants in terms of the imported vehicles. Now, is that we need to sort out our import-export infrastructure, including freight, rail, ports, energy, and all those support industries that are going to make it possible for us to do certain things. We need to sort out that for our economic well-being, but at the back of it, we want to hear you, DM. What Now, this is in context of, for instance, we've always known that agriculture, mining, manufacturing, Africa. So when we're asked today, with all these things that are being presented, what do we say? What is our response? In the same one line. This is the economic trajectory of South Africa. DM Godlim, I'm sure, will agree that these sector plans are fine. But this should be, they should anchor our industrial policy in South Africa, which I hope is going to be finalized, so that there are no confusion. I'm saying you that apartheid South Africa, three key main things, and they built very strong SOEs that supported the economies of South Africa, and things worked. Is of the steel sector, what is the plan? We do want to understand what are the plans for future for auto sector, and what are the deep involvement, including the kind of incentives actually for all these sector plans we have for each, so that there's a balanced approach, as we said, that supporting auto sector, which is fine. But how about these other industries? What do we a growth trajectory in South Africa? Because it can't be that, countries like Niger, Senegal, all of them are growing at double digit. And there's nothing magical they're doing that we cannot do. But we have not been able to take radical decisions. If I'm not mistaken, DM Whitfield, we probably have more than 50, 56 minerals in South Africa. So we're not short of things to propel our economy can grow. And the last point, and then Member Lufefe will come in. The last point that I want to raise is that we have raised this thing, we'll share with the DG. So did a matrix on job supported, job created, investment, export. I don't know what was the other thing. About 5, 6 things that we looked at that had numbers coming to the portfolio committee or to the people of South Africa. You want to talk about these numbers, there has to be credibility of the numbers. They must make sense. So if we didn't intervene and put incentive or anything, those firms are going to close. Is that what you mean? So if you say job created, we know those were jobs that did not exist, but they exist because government has intervened. And. So let's be clear how about what we say and do about this of examining these 3 subsectors of the economy. What has been the decline, and then how best we can talk about arresting that decline and ensure that there is economic growth in South Africa. I will give, and we will still have sufficient time for second round members. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. Maybe, Chair, let me am more interested in the revised APP.
which will, in a sense, encompass all the discussions around the and of course, at the back of that, we stimulate our economy to get the much needed jobs. But the character of that industrial policy is going to be very important, because industrial policy in itself, acting DG, is not enough if the character, structural transformation of our economy to drive that growth and development and address the imbalances of the past, to be more inclusive and to ensure that those that have been paid in the productive sectors of our economy. So those principles are important about the industrial policy that we are talking about. But another principle should be, because this extractive nature of our economy, of shipping out our raw minerals, the so-called pit to port, has shown that it is into our economy. You see, of course, I now to just comment on the presentations around the master plans. Of course, the master plans are sector-specific interventions. And of course, there's some level of social, having a broad agreement with stakeholders in that particular sector. But you see, my question would be, in South Africa now, and that retreat, unfortunately, has been paralleled by a retreat in public investment as well, which of course would answer maybe the question that Honorable Palm was raising. That then, if there's a retreat in public investment, and it means there's a retreat in public social infrastructure and so on, good as nothing, because we, together with the private sector, almost in like a so in essence, it means that we've got to be clear about the economy by investing in the state. This means that we've got to go against this approach of so-called, because what it does, it hollows out the capacity of the state to intervene in stimulating growth in the economy. Of course, against this popular narrative that the intervention of the state in the economy saves the economy from what you call the so-called neutrality of the invisible hand. Now it's quite critical, even in these instances of these hands, to say that the state, through policies, that the state must not be kind of a say, this is what we want at the end. At the end, and if we're supporting the auto sector, the value chains in the auto sector, it must not just be assembly points here in South Africa and then what, but in actual fact, we're supporting assembly points. We must say, if we are saying a safety belt, you want to tell me that South Africans can produce a safety belt. You want a state that is decisive, a leadership that is decisive, that is going to say, if we're supporting you, 1, 2, and 3, and 4 has got to be produced here in South Africa. By the way, they take the local capital that they've generated here and invest it in international markets, not to stimulate growth in productive sectors of the very same economy that they've mobilized. The state leadership has got to play a central role in these master plans. But of course, if this master plan policy, then they are good as nothing to me. And maybe as we are having this conversation, what would be the role of an industrial strategy that would incorporate these master plans to ensure that there's growth and development also? And we've had this discussion somewhere, that our economy, as much as it is local, but it is integrated into the global economy. And we've got to ask a question in relation to these trade agreements, that as South Africa we have our own local industry. If we need to review some of the trade agreements to say, because we have taken a decision that there's going to be local beneficiation, those that are largely oriented, and we must be decisive in doing that. And the issue of localization, I get tired of discussing it. And I think, again, it comes back to the issue of leadership. Because you can't tell me that we're still 30 years having a discussion on why we can't localize, why we should making. And all these things need is implementation and putting in place of legislation in place. Because if you want change, you have got to accept that there are going to be labor pains. And you must condition the citizens of South Africa that we are going to insist on localization, we are going to insist on beneficiation of our raw minerals. There are going to be labor pains. It might be difficult for the next 5 years, but as we move through, we will see the end of it. But if you have this leadership that is moribund, doesn't want to act, doesn't want to experiment, and act parliament, discuss things that we should not have been discussing. I mean, we can't be discussing now that there's a low demand in steel, whilst all over the country, the rail network has broken down, and there is demand for public infrastructure, for steel in fixing public infrastructure to ensure that the movement, and we're still talking about how do we rebuild the steel industry. It's a no-brainer. You see, but people, DG, you are a PhD person. I don't know how you miss these things. I don't have a PhD myself, but I just think it's a no-brainer to me. Now, where we're decisive, we don't theorize these things, but we hold people to account on the basis of what is of South Africa. If you are not, then why we can't sit here and beg you because you're a minister of the ANC. We must be frank and clear to you that you are messing up, because this economy and this South Africa now can't continue to be about defending each other when people are messing up South Africa. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you very much. Is now Cora able also, DM, we are able to get technical guidance as well to respond. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I will now, we will now resume the program, and we will allow Deputy Minister Whitfield and the team to answer substantively on these questions that have been asked. But if some of the questions you are not in the position to answer now, it's fine. As we normally do, you will then have to reduce them in writing, so that we don't bog down to issues and we save time. I know that there is an appetite for the second round from all the members, so let's just try and share the remaining time between ourselves and the members in terms of responding. So those that you won't respond, in 5 days you respond, but obviously just give us an indication whether you've understood and appreciated the questions as asked. Thank you very much. Over to you, dear.
Thank you very much, Chairperson, and thank you very much to the colleagues on the Portfolio Committee, all of the honourable members, for their questions. Chair, as you indicated, there may be some detailed responses required which can be committed to writing for the benefit of the committee, and information which exists which can be circulated hopefully almost immediately so that you don't have to wait too long for that detail. Allow me then just to touch on a few issues, Chair, before I hand over to the acting DG and the team. On the issue, Honourable Gigaba, of greater coordination, I agree with you. I think it's, some of us are behind the curtain for the first time, and I think that there is opportunity to drive efficiency in the manner in which government coordinates through the existing governance structures. But I think that it's important to also note that DTIC now chairs the economics cluster, and I think that's significant because it's significant for a number of reasons, for some of the reasons raised by the colleagues here, but it places DTIC at the nexus of driving economic policy through government. We've discussed issues of water security, we've discussed issues, everything impacts on the economy. And so it's critical that DTIC sits at the coordination of that structure. And I trust that the Minister will give it the necessary impetus that is required to bring all of the key departments where there are those binding constraints in terms of logistics, port infrastructure, rail, etc., into the conversation in a much more coordinated, focused way. So everybody, when Cabinet then makes a decision, everybody is on the same page at that point. And I think that there are examples where your specific example, where there may be some, where the left hand and the right hand are not necessarily in sync, but that is hopefully going to be resolved with DTIC at the center of that cluster. Insofar as the Executive Oversight Committees are concerned, there were one or two questions or comments or points made around that. I did raise at the beginning that this is a key element of ensuring that where there are sectors where South Africa can be competitive and where we can really drive growth and jobs, inclusive growth and jobs, and to bring the outsiders into the inside of the economy, those that have been marginalized, small and medium-sized enterprises, and make them part of the conversation. I think the Executive Oversight Committee plays a critical role there. What is going to be important going forward is the, can I call it the division of labor, DM Godlimpi, in terms of making sure that we are supporting the Minister to attend these EOCs so that they continue to sit. It cannot be the case where if a minister is not available for an EOC within the delegated responsibilities of the two deputy ministers, we must make sure there's continuity of those structures so that we strengthen governance in that platform. Honourable Mdluli asked the question around, well, you know, who does oversight of the Oversight Committee? I would argue that Parliament does, ultimately. I would argue that the success or the challenges or the opportunities that exist within master plans, the shortcomings that the committee may feel exist, that is for the committee to provide that oversight, the frequency of meetings of EOCs, the composition of those EOCs, and to make sure that Parliament then obviously does its duty to hold the department responsible and accountable for the master plans that fall within our domain, which are 8. And it looks like 9. It looks like cannabis has come our way. Or is it 8 in total? Okay, 8 plus 1. Then, just insofar as the discussion around industrial policy and industrialization, I think the department has made it clear that we want to, that transformation is a key element of the department's approach to industrialization. I don't think that anything that has been presented is contradictory to that. I think that the sense of urgency that I'm feeling from the committee is, and this comes back to Honorable Gigapa's point around coordination in government in order to make decisions as quickly as possible to be responsive to the issues that we're dealing with. But I would also just make the point that some of the issues we have been trying to deal with for the last 5 years, China was dealing with 25 years ago, 20 years ago. And so we need to look at how we develop industrial policy. If the mission is the reindustrialization of our economy, I think it is then a concession that we need to reindustrialize, which then proves your point, right? That we're not in a good space, that there's huge opportunity for us, but that future, we need to look into the future, not look at how we reindustrialize by looking backwards. And one of the items that will come before the committee chair, I think towards the end of November, is the green hydrogen commercialization strategy and related, I think, items on the green economy or green industrialization. I think that is something that if we look at that committee meeting, acting DG, how we supplement that presentation with some of the work that's been done in the development of the decarbonization value chain, how that can support the steel industry in components manufacturing for renewable energy equipment. And I think that that is the kind of discussion that or it certainly is the discussion that we are having within the department. And again, just in tackling those binding, the logistics infrastructure, ports, roads, rail, etc., we already, in our planning sessions at the IDC a couple of months ago, we brought in government departments, we brought in Transnet, we brought everybody around the table in the development of our APP to make sure that we are aligned in order to achieve the required objectives to grow the economy. The master plans are only going to be as successful, for example, as the infrastructure that exists to support them. And one of the key components that we've identified is an export-led industrialization strategy as well, from a value addition point of view. How do we beneficiate what we have? How do we drive manufacturing, the manufacturing sector, to support the manufacturing sector? As you can see, there's a tremendous amount of work that needs to be done in order to turn that around. In terms of the detailed questions, Chairperson, around the steel industry, specifically the number of jobs, I think that was asked, the number of jobs that have been lost, I suspect that that will be a detail that will need to be committed in writing. In terms of the history of the steel industry, Chair, I'm not in a position to give you the answer that you might want, not a student of history. But perhaps the acting DG and others might want to weigh in on that and what the future is for the steel industry. I do know that the minister has been exercised with this issue around the steel industry. We know that ArcelorMittal is always, it feels like 1 foot in and 1 foot out, and we're doing what we can to support the industry. There have been some focused discussions around the import or export duties on non-ferrous scrap, for example, and those conversations will continue. I think that, Chair, I'm going to ask the acting DG, I know that you want to do another round, to come in on some of the questions that were asked in the first round to provide some detail. But I think the critical point that I would also make is that we can't live hand to mouth as an economy. We can't live hand to mouth. We need to plan for a future that can that we can be competitive in. And I think that, if I may say, I think that there will be master plans that succeed because we have the relevant skills or the pre-existing competitive environment within those sectors, and there may be others which require more support from a skills transfer or skills development point of view. There was a point made around how we upskill the labor force in order to transition with the future economy. But I do believe that, and if I may use a specific example, one thing we do quite a lot is cut ribbons, I think, as politicians. But I was very privileged to be invited to go to a battery manufacturing facility and to open that facility and to see the amount of local content that is utilized in the production of what they're doing. It's extraordinary. And if we look at that small example and we extend that into the decarbonization value chain, green industrialization, how that can stimulate the steel sector, but also within the African Continental Free Trade Area, the opportunity to manufacture rolling stock for the continent and to really stimulate that local demand and continental demand for steel. DM Gottlieb, do you want to come in? You happy? Acting DG.
Thank you, DM. So maybe perhaps to approach the questions by just indicating to the committee, and I think some of the points were raised by members of the committee, that in the main, what the master plan seeks to do is reduce the cost of doing business for enterprises so that they are competitive, to deal with issues of market structure, and then also how do we stimulate export demand, because we are a small economy for the type of scale of industrial activity that we need happening in South Africa to absorb the labor that we have and to be able to deal with all the other social ills that in part have perpetuated because we've just had growth that hasn't been able to assist us to solve those things. So on the steel side, a couple of issues around just the cost of doing business, the market structure, and also this export push. So on the cost of doing business, members will know that one of our big selling point as we're going out, selling people the potential for steel fabrication in South Africa was the low cost of our electricity. And it was a big selling point. For metal fabrication, for that level of energy intensity, the electricity is a big selling point. And what we've seen over time is that that business case has eroded. And therefore, if you want a steel sector, you've got to look at different places from which you can entice that investment to be able to create value. And that's why we are saying one of the ones that are easy to do is that government buys steel that is fabricated in South Africa. Part of what we used to call designation, because at least if you guarantee demand, you are creating a business case for some of these investments to continue. It's absolutely correct that over the years we've been losing that capability. We haven't lost it to countries that are very competitive, that have superior quality investment environment. No, we have lost it to countries that are doing exactly what we are debating we need to do. We've lost it to countries that are buying their own steel, that are localizing at home, but we are still debating whether we need to do it or not. So by the end of the debate, we may not have capacity that we need. And that is the danger and the urgency with which we need to react. Otherwise, we will lose an important sector for industrialization. If you can't even fabricate your own steel, forget about beneficiating many of the other minerals, because all of them are really, they require a similar business case to the business case of having a feasible fabricating capability. My colleague is here. She'll share with you some of the issues that we've had to deal with on the steel side, particularly as it regards demand. That when we say that it's not just government is not investing, even where we are investing, the level of import penetration is damaging to local capability. And that's the point that we've been making for years. And the issue I'm raising with the committee is that even now, as we are debating, companies are closing, as Member Tambo has indicated. And by the time we end the debate and say, no, designation is okay, we will have to go back to those countries to go get those investments because we decimated our own capability. And then when you do that, what you do is you allow capital flows with the other side on the dividend side, while you have decimated South African companies that when they get this demand and they get the capability to build, they reinvest in South Africa. So I wouldn't say that it's a concession or lack thereof. It's a reality that we just have not been investing in this sector in a more targeted way, like what we are required to do. And aligned to that, the fact that the cost of doing business, just based on electricity alone, has gone tremendously up. So if we still want to have capability to produce, we're going to have to look for other places to make that capability feasible here. And this designation, it's one of those. Then I think DM Godlimbi has dealt with it. But before I go there, the issues of transformation, we can only literally talk to transformation when we are growing sectors. Otherwise, that transformation will have very little effect. And what we need to do in the steel sector, get the basics right with transformation in mind, and then we will be able to leverage government support for transformation. Because Member Gigaba asked, when you're supporting the sectors, are you also insisting on transformation? Because many studies have shown that it's only where government insists on transformation that in most instances it does happen. And in our incentives, we insist on transformation, but that on its own, it's insufficient. You have to use higher order instruments, like the instrument of designation, like the master plans, so that we say to companies, if we secure the demand for you in the South African market, this is what you need to do also for new entrants. And then it becomes a social compact that is a virtuous cycle that affects economic growth positively. And on the plan going forward for master plans, absolutely. We're going to have to look at new growth sectors. DM has mentioned the issue of green industries. We have to look at greening industries as well, because we do have a threat coming from one of our, actually two of our big export markets on the carbon intensity of our economy. And if we don't resolve the carbon intensity of our economy, they will make it very, very difficult for our products to remain competitive in their markets. I agree with Honorable Thring that this is now no longer about the environment. I think it left the environment discussion long ago. This is a trade barrier for people to support, at least temporarily, their own markets, and hoping that by the time we take them up to the WTO and various other places, we would have had our own capability decimated, such that even when we win the case, we've lost the war. So I think DM Godlimbi may want to come in because we were having the similar discussion just now in the G20, because we do have to take it where it bites, which is in the G20. But we don't just go there and argue to make right arguments. We have to internally also be positioning our own sectors to be able to react. A case in point, we've got a Sasol that has technology that can assist Europe also green their industries, but they've put a requirement that actually locks out Sasol out of that transition process. So we can go and have this big negotiation with them and have big arguments about how wrong they are. Or we can work with Sasol to make sure that we find a way to get Sasol in and to work to get standards within the EU that also support our own capabilities. And we are doing both. And that's why I'm delegating upwards to ask DM to come in and just elaborate on some of those, because those are real threats. And Honorable Thring mentioned it, as far as the citrus issue is concerned, it's going to affect steel, it's going to affect many of the areas where we still have competitive advantage. That's why it's no longer about the environment. It's actually about turning us into cafe economies for everybody to be able to export to us, especially in the context of the AFCFTA. So we see the AFCFTA as a big push for industrialization. Some people see the AFCFTA as a push for them to be able to dump in a larger market. And those are the risks that we have to deal with, and the new generation issues that each of these master plans will have to now be responding to. How do we deal, what does green steel look like for us, and how do we affect the discussions at a global level about what should be the standards for green steel, with a view that South Africa's capability is protected and not closed out because of some of these discussions about saving the environment while you are importing coal from South Africa. So the point Honorable Thring makes, it's very well made. The issue of coordination, Honorable Gigaba has raised it. It's a real issue. It's a real issue that you have a master plan on sugar, in part because you've got so many new entrants in the sugar sector. But there is a levy that actually is coming to dampen demand. Nothing wrong with that levy, except if we had sequenced it right and said, no, go into biofuels, so that when we do that levy, it doesn't affect you. But because our coordination is not even based on sequencing of implementation of policy, it becomes a real challenge. And this moment that we have, that as the DTIC, we can now chair the cluster, see all of these things coming, and have sufficient enough muscle to raise the economic implications of these things. It's a real opportunity that we shouldn't miss. Remember, what we're not saying is that people must eat sugar to death, but we're saying from an industrial development perspective, you create a solution for the sector in order to transition sustainably. And that's why issues of biofuels, we should have done that. And then transition sustainably is not only South African sugar, we also bring in sugar from time to time. So that sugar will also have to be affected by this. So the coordination remains a big issue that we will need to resolve. And I'm very, very grateful, Honorable Thring, on your observation that master plans, insufficient as they may have been, are very critical. At a meso level of sectoral development, that you do need industry in the room, you need labor in the room, you need government in the room to say what should be the direction going forward. in each of the sectors. You're not going to be able to do it any other way. And hopefully, with us implementing this correctly, we can also get the sequencing right, that just because there are new pressures globally about, now we're talking sugar, but at some point it was plastics, at some point it was many other things. We don't allow that pressure to allow us to be out of sequence, where we bring in these things, some of them very good, but we bring it from countries that are sponsoring it because they're ready to implement, and we are nowhere there as far as implementation is concerned. We've got similar issues with some of the chemicals that are deemed as detrimental to the environment. And what I'm not saying is that we should run the environment into the ground. I'm not saying that. But I'm saying the countries that sponsor those things, they sponsor them when they are ready with a product. And as you sign, you're literally signing a trade agreement, but you're thinking you're signing a negotiations based on the environment. And it is that level of tact that we need to bring much more close into our own policy-making process and also international engagement process, as even Honorable Ndluli was alluding to. Then on the CBEM, DM Godlimbi will come in on that. And then on concessional funding, we've got a real problem. We are playing in sectors where countries are throwing everything. Other countries are throwing everything. Our level of concessionality is almost nothing compared to what they can bring in. What the US is able to do by just stopping Chinese imports through an act is nothing compared to anything that we will ever do by putting an incentive in the kitty. So we're going to have to play to our strength, which is securing our market, working actively to secure the African market, and then working on the R&D process to be able to create our own capabilities that will take us forward. Desalination, we've been talking about it for forever. We really are not making the strides that we need to be making in the pace that we need to be responding to. So the issue is that we are not actively dealing with the cost of production in South Africa to close all the imports from being able to compete as effectively as they do. And I'm putting it in that way because those imports don't have any superior operational manner. They only are able to perform like that in South Africa because their governments are doing what we are discussing. So that's one of the big issues that we will have to deal with. And then on the skills front, I think the minister and both DMs may have indicated in the past that we do want to have a big skills push even in our own APP towards existing and new sectors going forward, but the colleagues will indicate what that particular skills fund in the furniture industry, how it has performed thus far. And then I'm going to maybe, Chair, if you allow, because I think I would have dealt with parts of Member Mdluli's questions and also Member Tambo's questions, and maybe not your question, Chair, on the import and export infrastructure, which is actually an important point. We had raised with the committee that the one thing we are looking at, again under the cost of doing business, is reducing the cost of access of these products to these services through our SOCs, and it's going to be work that we will be seized with at least in the coming few months, to see how we can work with some of the SOCs to get a business model that doesn't mess up their balance sheet, but allows us to truly and indeed be focused on industrializing as opposed to making it easier for raw minerals, not easier, cheaper for raw minerals to leave our shores, but while we do the opposite on manufactured goods. So I'll ask my colleague from the steel sector if she can just come in to just talk about the state of steel and the issues we've been dealing with on the demand side. I'll ask Mumisa to come in on the agro-processing side and some of the issues there, including on sugar. And Madume, you
Yeah.
can decide.
You
if
have
there's
20
any
minutes
further.
for everything, so that there is a second round, and also we'll have to be very brief, members, when we come back to you.
Fine.
We in respect of time. Thanks. Over to you, HOD. Acting DG, sorry.
Thank you, Chair, and I apologize if I've taken longer than the Chair had anticipated. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Chairperson and members and DM, and good afternoon. I'll respond to two questions. The first one is around the transformation fund, the return on investment in terms of the sugar industry transformation fund. Thank you so much for the question, members. Just to say that in 2018-2019, the portfolio committee, previous portfolio committee met with the sugar industry, the South African Sugar Association, and they made a commitment in terms of the transformation of the sugar industry. This is mainly premised on the fact that in the sugar industry, the majority of beneficiaries are small-scale growers. As you would know that the sugar is mainly produced in KwaZulu-Natal as well as Mpumalanga. So we needed to look at, the interventions in terms of the sugar industry, mainly to make sure that we provide support to the small-scale growers. We are talking about plus 15,000 small-scale growers in the sugar industry. So the South African Sugar Association committed 1 billion rands in terms of the transformation of the sugar industry. That was mainly to support things like your production inputs, things like to provide subsidies for logistics support, because some of the farmers, they are far from the sugar mills. So the industry needed to come up, with issues in terms of interventions to support the small-scale growers. So that's almost 1 billion rands that was allocated by the industry over the last 4 to 5 years. So as we speak now, the South African Sugar Association is busy with the impact assessment in terms of that 1 billion rands transformation fund. So that work or that assessment report, it's underway, Chairperson, in terms of that 1 billion rands transformation fund. And then also there's a question around the 1.8 million rands, which was mainly for the furniture industry to support against skills development in the furniture industry. This is basically a partnership between the South African Furniture Initiative, which is an association that is representing the furniture manufacturers in the furniture industry, as well as, it's a partnership between SAFI as well as the City of Cape Town. The 1.8 million was mainly for the light manufacturing enterprise support program, which was mainly an allocation by the City of Cape Town to provide support to SMMEs. To date, we have almost 13 SMMEs that have been part of that program, and so far they've been provided support on things like business plans, things like technical support, things like mentorship, and so on and so forth. This is mainly because of the fact that, as you know, the furniture industry, it's a high labor-intensive industry, and there are quite a lot of SMMEs that that have to be provided with training, things like carpentry, things like upholstery, and things like furniture design, and so on. So the South African furniture industry is partnering with the City of Cape Town in terms of that program, which is the light manufacturing enterprise support program. Thanks.
Thank you, DG. Good afternoon, Chairperson. Good afternoon, honorable members. If we can just appreciate that steel is characterized by international trade, that means that what happens in the global market actually has an impact on our steel. For instance, most economies, especially the East, recently have expanded production capacity in their economies. And that means, where does that steel end? It ends on our shores. There's a global excess capacity of steel as it is. So we are actually grappling with the issue of imports that are flooding our shores and undercutting our locally produced steel. In terms of steel demand locally, our steel goes into the construction sector, it goes into the mining sector, it goes into the agricultural sector, it goes into, when we move on to more specialty steels, it goes into the automotive sector as well as capital equipment producing sectors. And one thing that I actually need to emphasize is that through the master plan processes, we have been able to actually coordinate, collaborate more with other state entities, including government departments, trying to leverage demand in projects within government. For instance, in the energy space, we have one of the biggest projects in the energy space, which is the Transmission Development Plan, where we are earnestly, as a department, working with ESCOM to ensure that we focus on those components that we can produce locally to actually maximize localization opportunities within the transmission, generation, and distribution programs of ESCOM and the National Transmission Company. On the issue of imports as well, we have been working earnestly as well with the Revenue Service SARS. We have an inter-agency working group where we focus on key strategic sectors of the economy, where we tackle issues of misdeclarations, undervaluations, etc., etc. So we just, in terms of the demand, we just need to ensure that the growth in terms of projects stimulates the demand for steel. We are all aware that this has been quite slow, but we are engaging actively with all the stakeholders within government and outside of government. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just quickly to answer some of the questions raised by Honorable Giga in terms of our working relationship with the SOCs. Yes, we do have working groups with ESCOM on the transmission lines for distribution and the transmission lines. So we are planning for that in terms of local demand. We are also working closely with Transnet on the rails and the maintenance of work-ons. I mean, if you have been following the news, also the CEO of Ford has indicated some progress that has been made on the planning of the railway line from Pretoria to the Eastern Cape for the exports of motor vehicles, just to reduce pressure on the roads. Then on the structural economic transformation, I think that's key, but it takes time. Also, Honorable Gaba raised an issue which requires some interventions in terms of institutional alignments, because there are certain decisions taken by either regulators or SOCs which affect industrialization. So, for instance, the cost-reflective tariffs, all right, which have an impact in terms of the the pricing of energy and rails and ports, which studies indicate that the prices are above the inflation rates, and that has an impact on the cost of manufacturing in the country. So it's something that does not necessarily controlled by the DTIC, but we must have a discussion on the developmental tariffs in order to support manufacturing in the country. Lastly, there are other issues raised with regards to undervaluation or misdeclaration, and that is in different sectors. So in furniture, for instance, because in certain instances furniture is not imported into the country as furniture, but as components. So certain components will attract different tariffs, all right? So that's where we have challenges of misdeclaration, and we have to work closely with SARS on how to deal with such challenges. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, Sibem. Okay. I think just to maybe let me start off with how do we move ahead from here on the demand side, and this thing about the incentives for this, that, and the other. I think it's a matter of fact, Honorable Tambo, that the South African economy has been deindustrializing. We can start off in 2005, or we can push it back to about 40 years ago, but the trend has been consistent over time. And the discussion is about what could have been done or what can be done to first reverse the trend and then put it on the upswing. And that's where the domestic demand thing comes into the equation. The last time I was here, I spoke about the problem of how the South African state is designed and how policy articulation becomes a bit schizophrenic in the process. Because the sort of domestic demand you want can best be generated by SOEs. So if you think about the South African state broadly as one company, you've got to talk about balance sheet signaling to the market. So if Transnet wakes up and says, okay, I want to build 30,000 kilometers of rail lines for the next 15 years between South Africa and, say, all the way up to Angola. It means even private sector capital holders would be interested in designing their own investment to be in line with that, because they know that the state is going to be buying this, and the other. The same thing with Eskom. If Eskom says, I'm building 14,000 kilometers of transmission line, all the folks who are working in manufacturing the cables, then they have a case to make. But if the state does not do that, then you're not going to get activity in the economy. That's where the problem has been. That is what we are pushing them towards. And that's what the APP is going to start signaling. There are discussions we're having with the SOEs to actually start getting into that space, including our own DFIs as well. We've tried to have a discussion about how the IDC itself could participate in this market signaling and say, we are prepared to finance transactions of this nature in this sector in order to get the steel manufacturing thing online. But we'll deal with the detail of it when we come back on that front. So the idea is to stop the decline and then push it upward. Pushing it upward will then include the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement. South Africa needs to lead the capital outlay for the AFCDA to work. If we don't have the network industries, the agreement will not come to life. And that requires rail, it requires transmission infrastructure, it requires water, it requires all sorts of things. And our SOEs will have to be the lead agents in doing that. That's the other element of the discussion that we are having. One of the things that we don't do well is on the tariff side of things, especially for steel. It's a difficult discussion, but it needs to be heard. But what do? We impose an 10% import tariff on steel. Some other countries impose as high as 25%. The United States sits at about 25%, others are at 17%, and because they are doing it in order to discourage the entry of steel from outside, in order to give the lifeline to their domestic steel sectors to sort of do that. This is where the discussion about renegotiating some of our economic partnership agreements comes into the equation. The other thing that we don't do, and this is another discussion that we're trying to have on the front of the cabinet planning part of things. You know, in Africa, Egypt has a higher steel consumption rate per capita than South Africa, using their domestic market, their construction sector, for instance. In South Africa, when you are building a house, ask the question, how much steel is embedded in these walls? So think about RTP houses, the things that we build every day. How much steel is embedded into that as part of the regulations that the construction industry is relying, or let's say the Department of Human Settlement. He's an engineer, so maybe Honorable Mkutu, this will make sense. If you say on top of every door, there must be a steel beam, you are essentially forcing every construction company to buy steel. And then in that manner, you are signaling to the market that there's going to be growing demand domestically for that thing. So these are some of the things that from the sitting we are on at the level of cabinet, we will try to get the other departments to sort of consider. Because the problem you have is a transversal policy articulation. The DTIC can have all these romantic dreams it has about how to grow these sectors, but the other policy departments and other levels don't reside with us. You've got to get it right at the top so that it moves. Now, one of the problems we are faced with, that's why the DG was talking about the need of greening our production processes. And the Chinese are also experiencing this thing. When you are building an industrial economy, you try to think about which market am I pitching this thing to. So I'm producing these industrial products for who to consume. And by colonial design, the South African economy has been designed to feed into Europe. It's as old as the arrival of whoever arrived here in whatever year. But that has been evolving, of course. The export basket has been evolving, but pretty much to cater for the European market as a combination of the purchasing power of that economy. Now, what the Europeans are doing, they are, both the Europeans and the Americans, they are returning to industrial policy full scale, but they are going about it in different ways. The United States brings the Inflation Reduction Act and the Science and Chips Act under the guise of national security. That's how it is explained. We're defending particular critical sectors of the economy, but it's essentially industrial policy to block out competitive goods. The Europeans are bringing carbon border adjustment mechanisms in the name of green transition, but it essentially says South African steel can't get into that market. In fact, the absurdity of it all is that you'll arrive to a point where almost everything South African won't get there because our production system are carbon heavy. So if they say anything produced using too much carbon does not come to the European market, then we're in trouble, including the South African auto sector. It might collapse as soon as 2026 because, and Honorable Mkutu was correct, yes, we're running assembly plants, but designed for the European market. Once they start raising the carbon border adjustment mechanism requirement, then all those things that are in East London and PE and Roslyn and Durban, they will have nowhere to go. So this is the sort of industrial policy world that we are operating under now. Now we're trying to push back against those. You know, we had a heated discussion in Brazil last week to say this thing is unsustainable for all of us in the world. They are doing it with China in mind, but the knock-on effect is on all of us. They are trying to block China's overcapacity, undermining their economies, but all of us are now at the mercy of this thing. And we don't have the capacity to transition as quickly as the other economies do. So it's a battle that we are going to have to take. I'm glad when you say, Honorable Tring, you raised it with them when you were there, because we need to fire from all cylinders. In fact, one of the things that we're picking up, very strange enough, is that there's a disconnect between what the European members of parliament understand to be CBAM and its impact, and what the Commission understands it to be. Because when you talk to the European members of parliament, they get shell-shocked sometimes. We didn't know that this thing actually has these consequences, but the Commission is driving it anyway. How we win that battle and get them to align and push back their timelines, because they have a deadline of 2026 and we want to push it back by some 10 years. But it's not a South African problem only, so we're trying to get as many countries as possible to sort of work with us in pushing these folks back and say, look, the timelines are too tight, you are going to kill all economies if you do that. But it's a discussion that we need to have. Chair, you ask, there's something you say about incentives. Maybe because this is a portfolio committee, we can be blunt. And our approach to industrial support has been terrible, although well-intended. It has been terrible because it's not sustainable. If we do the provision of money through the incentive scheme, we produce what the chair keeps on complaining about. We are basically, okay, you are nationalizing the wage bill of OEMs. We basically take public money to pay salaries on their behalf. Because what you are targeting is the production side of the equation, that it must not be costly for them just from that side. So you give them money. What do they take this money? The variable in the production equation that they tackle is labor. So you basically have the state that is paying wages, and then private capital is able to make money, and then Honorable Mkutu then explains what happens with that profit repatriation and what it does. But there are other mechanisms of supporting industry that we are exploring other than just that one side. Yes, you can sustain this support on this side, but it's fiscally draining. So under a constrained fiscus, you can't ramp up industrial support if it is only on incentives. But once you bring the tariff dimension to it, then you are able to do other much more structurally sustainable ways of supporting an industry. We are not going to talk about imports from a particular country against any other country on that equation. But suffice to say, there's legitimate reasons to think about how you protect the South African auto sector. But a much more sustainable one is to produce a South African car. And this discussion has disappeared over time. Not a sedan, not an SUV, not a whatever, but a low-cost car as an entry. So the consumption of auto assets in Africa is second-hand cars. That's the one thing that is big in Africa, in the rest of Africa. It's us South Africans who are obsessed with with new things because we think we are happening. The rest of the folks are buying them from Europe. What it tells you, forget that they are buying second-hand cars. It means there is a huge market in Africa for low-cost vehicles. Now, a South African low-cost vehicle can be built. Nothing fancy. I don't want to mention company names and say we can choose to compete with brand X because it would be as though but the point is that you look for the cheapest in the market, look at how it is produced and say, I know we can pitch at this level. And until we've perfected the model of doing that, and then we get there. Because unfortunately, the South African auto sector is held together by mostly European firms. You now have Chinese firms coming in, but you still don't have an African one. Until we solve it at that level, we need... The trick, of course, in this thing, I think it was Honorable Mkutu who was making the point about if you are doing social compacting, what is the investment element of it? That is, what is the private sector bringing to the party? And this is where we've not perfected this model. It is easier to even subsidize the wage bill of someone who says, I want to build a South African car. When I look at the production cost, I won't be able to afford this level of wages. But I'm building a South African car. Then you can say as government, okay, we'll take care of it until you because you are building something that is sustainable for the South African economy going forward. Now, that's a different incentive scheme to keeping together an assembly plant. We are keeping the assembly plants in check because that's what we've had since forever. That's what we have. But until we transition to our own local thing, we'll be every time an OEM in Europe must make an investment decision, they are not thinking about South Africa as a starting point. They are thinking about their bottom line as a global entity. And if it becomes cheaper to manufacture in a different jurisdiction than South Africa, they will make that decision. So we're essentially vulnerable to investment decisions that are located elsewhere, not here in South Africa. Now I'm talking about the structure of the auto sector and what it does for the long run. And we need to really have a discussion with the South African private sector and some of these OEMs about the possibility of venturing into a South African. Government can't build a car on its own, but it can support that initiative, and that's the conversation that we want to have with them. I thought, Chair, I must just engage on that level. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I was trying to send you a note. No, thank you very much. I will allow the members. I'll really try to keep you on a 2 to 3 minute rule now, because I know you have a follow up. So that we at least are satisfied with the engagement, and then we'll see how much time we still have for answers. Member Tring, Member Mdluli. Sir, you want to go first? Okay, you can go first.
I'd like to be excused from the meeting, so I have, as I said earlier.
Please
thanks.
do. You can, or you're leaving, or you don't have a question. Okay, Member Tring.
Thank you, Chair. I will not exceed my 3 minutes. Chair, on the health promotion levy or the sugar tax, I think we have to ask ourselves the question, and it has to be evidence-based, whether the HPL has actually had its desired effect in reducing obesity and diabetes in South Africa. And the knock-on effect of your food and your beverage industry moving to sweeteners like aspartame, which some medical journals have indicated are actually carcinogenic. And so the unintended consequence is that we could be making our population actually sicker with the introduction of the HPL. But is there evidence that it is only the sugar? Because doctors will tell you that it's not just sugar, but there's other stuff, like your carbs, for example, for some people that create obesity and diabetes. So then we're going to then we'll have to look at putting a HPL on bread and pasta, because those contribute to diabetes as well and obesity. So where's the evidence, the evidence base? And you know, the knock-on effect, unfortunately, is that thousands of jobs have been lost. And if we move now towards an increased tax on fruit juice, 100% fruit juice, we may see more job losses. Then, Chair, on beneficiation, I asked the former Minister, Mr. Patel, whether we are able to put in place an index on beneficiation so that we are able to track this beautiful policy that we have of beneficiation. And unless we are monitoring our improved ratios of increased beneficiation in South Africa, we're going to continue just to export to former colonial powers that see us as
you conclude,
exporters of raw material and consumers of finished products. And then the last one is on agriculture and agro-processing master plan. Is there any synergy with the Department of Basic Education, for example, to introduce agriculture as a subject within the curriculum, which would actually bolster this particular master plan? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Member Kikaba, then Member Mkotu. Member Tambo, you still want to come back? Okay, sure. Yes, then.
Thanks, Chair. There was a question that Honorable Tambo asked relating to which government entities were not enforcing local content. I want to add to that question, why are they not? Secondly, the master plans, Chair, and some of my remarks now are not questions really, but the master plans are a platform for driving industrialization, almost similar to how East Asian tigers did. I think what we need to do, because they provide a platform for us to implement a developmental state concept. What we now need to do is move beyond the lack of ambition and develop a bigger ambition, greater coordination, high-level skills, and bold leadership and visions. Because the type of coordination we can achieve through this can really catapult our economy to a new level to resolve the problems of deindustrialization that the Deputy Minister has referred to. And I think, as Honorable Mkutu was saying earlier, now getting out of the existing constraints in terms of policy and programs and beginning to look into new APPs. This is what we now need to work towards. And I think I would like, Chair, through you, to invite the department to take advantage of the existing appetite in the committee to support that type of thinking and intervention which is going to change the industrialization discourse in the country. Thirdly,
as you conclude,
as your 3 minutes, Chair. Thank you, Chair. Thirdly, Chair, I think industrialization actually must be a master plan in and of itself. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Member Mkutu.
Oh, Chair, thank you very much. That's the danger of allowing me to speak after a former president, minister, is that he might just capture me. No, I just want to ask a very opportunistic question, Chair, in relation to the point that was made that DTIC now is chairing the economic cluster. And to just get a sense, what is the sense of the deputy ministers in relation to the appetite of a key department such as Treasury at the level of its macroeconomic planning to support the ambitious industrial strategy that the DMs are speaking about? Because my sense is that if at that level, the planning on the one hand is signaling another thing, but at the level of macroeconomic policy, there is no synergy and support and coordination in relation to achieving those plans, you might have a problem. This is just my sense. So what is your sense in relation to that? Thank you very much, Chair.
That was so unlike you. Thank you very much. It was barely a minute. No, thank you very much. I think, colleagues, the essence of the portfolio committee, you know, if you look at manufacturing since 1994, it has contracted from 21% to about 13%. It's a rapid deindustrialization that has occurred. And I think the portfolio committee is effectively saying that we've got to do something about that. The mining sector has been in sharp decline itself. Agriculture, you know, a bit positive, but not that much, because we have not done anything on the land question in South Africa. So we've got to look into those issues. Now, what we think should be key issues that should concern the department, especially as we go through the new APP and our quest to industrialize South Africa again. We've got to have consensus on the non-tariff barriers and say what is it that we can do, as Honorable Kotlimpi was saying. If there's a problems around port congestion, about technical standards, about customs and all those issues. So we've got to agree who are the players and what do we do to ensure that there is an appetite on our part. On the tariff barriers as well, we've got to agree. DDG Susan was sharing with me what Thailand is doing, and I hope that you will have that kind of conversation, because we've not been bold enough on our tariff barriers in terms of what we need to do. So it's important that we look into those issues. Now, I want to posit, as you come back with the last round of response, that we think that the African Continental Free Trade Area is one critical area that must be locked down. It must, I hope that is binding. All the agreements, they are binding agreements. The second area is BRICS, which is non-binding. We really want to emphasize that. I don't know, through Ambassador in the negotiations, we have to push for the reciprocal preference agreements in the BRICS area. It just can't be the meeting of gentlemen with nice suits and ties and shaking hands. Something has to come out of it, because those two areas for me represent an alternative in the world trading system that we can advantage South Africa. So we have an appetite in ensuring that you look into those areas in the main. And the steel sector, the auto sector, and all other subsectors that are identified, the 8 plus the others that are being managed somewhere, the committee supports them, but there must be anchors of our industrial policy, which we hope it's something that will come in, and the cabinet and the related approvals will come through, so that at least we can say to the people of South Africa, where are we taking the country to address the triple challenges of inequality, unemployment, as well as poverty that is continuing. So I think the message is very clear, and as you have heard from honorable members, that we want to give full support to the department, so that when we hold each other accountable in the next round, in the next quarter, it should not be about ideological underpinning. I'm happy, Member Whitfield, that you understand that transformation is a prerogative and it's a law. You know, we've had a lot of discussion here as members, where we had to try and drum this understanding that that which is law must be implemented, and it must be done. So that's the kind of approach that we appreciate, and we're really looking forward to ensure that when we hold each other accountable, it's on these things that we have clarified ideologically to ensure that we're in unison with them. With that being said, I want to hand over to you, DM Whitfield and the team, and then you just wrap up. Thank you.
I think that...
At least you've got another 13 minutes.
Yes, thank you. I'm going to, I think DM Kotlimpi has an interest in the sugar question amongst one or two others, Chair, but let me just say, the department is clear about the transformation issue. That is one of the key priorities. There is absolutely no disputing the nature of the economy as one of insiders and outsiders. That has a history which does include decisions made over a very long time pre-94 and decisions that we've made since 1994 that need to also be addressed in order to build an inclusive economy. And so that is, I just want to reaffirm that. There may be debates in the committee around how we achieve that. I think the debates are healthy. But let me hand over at that point before we enter a debate on the topic to Honourable Godlimpi and then to the department if they have any comments.
Just to quickly say on the sugar thing, of course, I'm now preempting my conversation with them because I'm meeting them on Monday. As a general rule, Honourable Thring, it's a very unsustainable strategy to have a single product pipeline for an entire subsector or a sector. So the problem with the sugar industry is that it's been built such that it could collapse when some discussion on science comes up. I know this discussion is long. Is it sugar? Is it something else? But the laws have been there. We are now trying to find a way to diversify the uses of sugarcane in South Africa so that we can keep the sector alive as we are fighting with Honorable Mutsualedi and them on the other side, you know. So we're thinking about the Brazilian experience, the uses of biofuel, biofood, and so that the sector can survive, whether we're reducing the sugar content in coke or not, but the sector must survive. Then we can deal that. I thought, let me deal with that part. This is what we say when we say we're reviewing master plans over and over again. It's to try and make them agile and get to other areas that work. The SOEs that are not enforcing what. I know where the DTIC got this. I'm not sure whether it is still like that. There was a problem with, okay, let's take a simple thing, transformers at Eskom. If they will say that they are buying transformers at the lowest cost price, then they are likely going to source them internationally. So this is where the problem comes, former Minister of DPE. It's your SOEs that are not complying with this localization thing sometimes. But we've been having this conversation with them. So I don't want to say they are still defaulting now. It could very well be that they have moved an inch on that front. You know, Chair, whilst it is bad, but there are some positives that have happened. You know, the DTIC, through the ITC, has been able to rescue Score Metal in Germiston. And Score Metal is now, it's now working in almost like a sustainable way. It's a pity that Saldanha is going through what it is going through. But the point I want to make is that we will keep on trying to keep the steel sector alive as much as possible and to provide support where we can. And to also say, Chair, we appreciate the cooperation of the Portfolio Committee on this strategy. I think we've been having a discussion on strategy for 4 months fully. And each encounter, we move closer and closer to refining what the strategy must look like. And we will keep on moving together with you in conversation until we have a product that is completely viable. Honorable Mkutu, on the macroeconomic policy coordination front, there are areas of broad agreement with the National Treasury already. There are areas of natural attrition because there must be a change of gear. So let me give you a case in point. National Treasury says we need to reduce our national debt or the debt to GDP ratio. Now their starting point is to look for any and everything that they can cut spending on, and so on. Now, we are saying to them, even if you guys want to continue with managing spending, but try not to cut expenditure growth on industrial policy. And they don't disagree with us on that. They say, yes, because we want growth enhancing interventions, we might be willing to do that. But let's do proper modeling of what that impact will be. So there's a degree of agreement. We say we want SOEs to improve domestic demand by pushing through with their capital expenditure programs. So Transnet, Rail, Eskom, this and the other. They say we agree with you on that. We are just not sure whether that can be handled by the fiscus on its own. Our discussions with the SOEs is to improve their balance sheet so that they could also go to the capital markets. So there's broad agreement, but areas of disagreement on the path to bid. And they say, in the short to medium, we are constrained, but we can agree on the medium to long term on how we ramp up there. But I think in time we'll find each other completely. The strategic perspective of what must be done, the National Treasury is pretty much saying, yeah, we can work like this, but they are dealing with a different anxiety. How to keep the national debt in check in the here and now, not in the next 7 years. That's where then and I had a bit of a long discussion with the Minister of Finance, for instance, yesterday about some of these things. Okay, he's speaking tomorrow, some other day. Let me not say what I wanted to say. There's an area of fundamental agreement that he shares with us on how to even approach the fiscal stabilization program such that it does not disrupt room for maneuver on industrial. But he will speak for himself when the time is right, and you will hear the indication that we are broadly agreed.
Chairperson, the acting DG and the team will provide comprehensive responses to any outstanding questions that the committee has asked to which they've not received an answer. DM, do you want to come in?
I forgot.
Do you want to say what the finance minister is saying tomorrow?
BRICS. I know, Chair. Chair, we agree with you on the BRICS issue. In fact, at least you now agree with us. This was our complaint, that BRICS does not have that trade dimension to it. I think we need a joint session with DERCO and us to have this discussion. I don't know how it can be structured. We need a session of the portfolio, maybe a joint session of portfolio committees to really dive into this thing. So, the DTIC appears not to be enthusiastic about BRICS, not because of the politics of it, but because of the absence of this thing at the trade level. What exactly are we trying to do here? And there is reluctance on some BRICS countries to get into that conversation about the preferential trade agreements that must come into that. And I'm not sure whether we want to say reciprocal or we want to use the WTO language of special and differentiated treatment, because there are capacity differences amongst BRICS countries. And if we were to have a liberalized trade agreement, this conversation we're having about steel will never take off. Because then one of our BRICS member countries will complain about our tariffs on the steel sector when they have excess capacity to sort of call. So the special and differentiated treatment is what we need at BRICS so that it could be a better structure. But I think we can ventilate it better when we do there. On the AFCFTA, I think we're moving quite well on that front, because the only gap on it, which is what we are trying to be vigilant about, is for South African SOEs not to be lackluster when the time is right. When you say you're building an Africa-wide infrastructure program, South African SOEs must be central to that. And I think it's a battle that we are also going to have to take up as well as this portfolio committee of the DTIC. And maybe have conversations with Treasury as well about what room exists for our SOEs to expand their infrastructure outlay into the continent, not just internal. But Chair, I just thought on that, the sooner we do the BRICS discussion, the better, because it might also help us to inform the strategy of DERCO and the presidency when they are going that side. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. As I said, we'll provide written responses to the outstanding questions. Thank you to the members of the committee for their questions, their insights, suggestions, strong suggestions, and we'll take it under advisement. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. The meeting is officially adjourned. I will request members of the committee to give us about 5-10 minutes we are readjusting our program based on the new developments. But the meeting is officially adjourned. We'll just allow the colleagues to just leave us so that we can quickly finalize this. Thank you very much, DM and the team. Much appreciated.